is part 2. And in part 2, we're going to be graphing both of these inequalities. We know that the number of students that we have has to go from 0 to 50. So we're going to graph all of, remember we made x our morning students. So we're going to go from 0 to 50 for the x-axis. And you have a maximum of 50 and you can't have less than 0. The same thing for your all-day students. You can have a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 50 because you can't have more than 50 students. And because we made our all-day students y, we put them on this axis. And because we made our morning students x, they go on that axis. Okay, all we're going to do now is graph both these inequalities and figure out where there's an overlap. We know that the values could be somewhere in quadrant 1, but we don't know where. So we're going to have to graph them to find out. What you've got to do here is figure out your x and y intercepts. So to figure out your x and y intercepts, turn these into equals, and remember to find your x intercept, you make y equal to 0. And to find your y intercept, you make x equal to 0. And then you've got points. Now I'm not going to go through and show you how to do that. You have that in your notes. If you don't remember, go back and look, because I'm not going to show you again. So here, when I make x equal to 0, y becomes 50. Now I don't want you to do y equals mx plus b here. It's not going to work. Do it with x and y intercepts. If I make y equal to 0, x becomes 50. So now I've got 2 points. I'm going to do the same thing over here. When I make x 0, y becomes 40. And when I make y 0, x becomes 120. Okay, so now you've got enough points. So let's graph the first one, 0, 50. So 0 for x, 50 for y. There's your first point. X is 50, y is 0. There's your second point. X is 0, y is 40. And x is 120, y is 0. Now that's off the grid, so this isn't going to really work. So what do you do here? Well, this is an unfair kind of question because we have to find one more point that works. So what it's saying is when it hits when y is 0, it's hitting the x-axis like way off the page here. So what do we do? Well, we're going to have to find one more point. So what I would do is plug in a point so that would fit on this graph. So let's maybe choose, I don't know, 30? Does 30 work? Let's try 30. So let's plug in x as 30. So when x is 30, what does y become? Well, x is 30 plus 3y. So I'm plugging that into here. And let's make it equal to 120. Don't use inequality, make it equal. Okay, so then you get 3y equals, take away 30. So you get 90. Y divided by 3, 90 divided by 3, y becomes 30. Okay, so x is 30, y is 30. Okay, now you've got a second point. So that means on your first graph, it went from this point to that point. So now I don't do this, but I'm going to freehand it. Because I don't have a ruler available. And on the second graph, it looks something like that. Okay. So that means the overlap exists between both graphs. If I shaded the entire region here, I could shade that. But this one won't include this part. So the only parts I can shade below both lines, and we know this because y is less than, I have to shade below, is here. Okay, I can't shade here because it'll work for the first graph, but it's above this line. And because y has to be less than, I have to be below both lines. So I graph in here. If y had said above, then I would have shaded this part because you would have been above both lines, but because it's less than, you have to shade in there. So where you have this little overlap, right, this gives you a solution set for the system. Okay, so this is for 2 or more linear inequalities. So this is what you're trying to do with these examples. Now, if you get stuck on the graphing portion and you're not sure why the shading, go back, watch this again, and understand where you have to shade. So I'll say it one more time just to be totally clear. Because we have y is less than, we know, or equal to, we're drawing straight lines, and we know that it has to be below the graph. Well, if I shade for this one, we know it has to be here. And if I shade for that one, it has to be below here. But I can't shade above either line. It has to be below both lines. So the only spots below both lines is here. So that makes sense.